The golden light of the late afternoon sun filtered through the perfectly manicured gardens of the imperial palace, casting long shadows across the marble fountains and geometric flower beds. The air was filled with the delicate strains of a Strauss waltz, performed by an orchestra positioned beneath a white pavilion adorned with garlands of white roses. Crystal glasses clinked softly as Vienna's elite mingled in their finest evening wear, the women's silk gowns rustling like whispers, the men's frock coats immaculate in black and gray. Duke Friedrich von Adler stood near the central fountain, his tall frame rigid as a Prussian soldier's, one gloved hand resting on the silver handle of his walking cane. His steel blue eyes surveyed the charity ball with the same detached interest one might observe chess pieces on a board. At 42, he had perfected the art of presence without participation, of being seen without being known. The gray at his temples gave him a distinguished air that matched his carefully trimmed mustache and the severe set of his jaw. Duke Friedrich, how wonderful to see you supporting our cause, Countess Elizabeth von Steinberg approached with calculated grace, her chestnut hair arranged in an elaborate chignon beneath a hat adorned with peacock feathers. Her brown eyes assessed him with the precision of an accountant tallying assets. Your generous donation will surely help those unfortunate souls in the outer districts, though between us I cannot imagine living as they do. She laughed lightly, a sound like wind chimes that carried no warmth. The scent of French lavender surrounded her in an expensive cloud. Friedrich inclined his head slightly, his expression revealing nothing. Charity is a duty of our position, Countess. His voice was deep and measured, each word precisely placed. Indeed, indeed. Though I must say, you perform your duties with such detachment. She opened her ornate fan, studying him over its painted edge. One might think you have no heart at all beneath that impeccable waistcoat. Before he could respond, a commotion erupted near the garden's entrance. The orchestra faltered, the violins screeching to a halt mid-note. Voices raised in alarm, and the crowd parted like water before a stone. A child burst through the gathering, her bare feet leaving muddy prints on the pristine stone pathway. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old, so thin that her collarbone jutted sharply beneath her torn brown dress. Her blonde hair hung in dirty tangles around a face streaked with tears that had carved clean paths through the grime on her cheeks. Her enormous green eyes were wild with terror and determination. Help, please, someone help. Her voice was raw, desperate, cutting through the shocked silence like a knife. They beat my mother. She's dying. Please. The aristocrats recoiled as if the child carried plague. Women lifted their skirts away from the mud and dirt. Men turned their backs, suddenly fascinated by the fountain or the distant trees. The security guards rushed forward to remove this unwelcome intrusion, but the little girl was faster than desperation made her. She dodged between the startled guests, her small hands reaching out, clutching at silk sleeves that pulled away in disgust. Please, Mama is dying. There's so much blood. Friedrich watched this unfold with the same impassive expression he wore for everything. Another problem of the lower classes, soon to be removed by the guards who were closing in on the child. He raised his glass to his lips, tasting nothing. The girl stumbled, her exhausted legs giving way. She fell hard on her knees before him, her small hands clutching at the fabric of his perfectly pressed trousers, leaving dirty handprints on the black wool. She looked up at him, and in that moment those enormous green eyes met his steel blue gaze. Please, sir, please. They'll kill her if no one comes. Please. Her voice broke on the last word, dissolving into sobs that shook her entire fragile frame. Friedrich stared down at her, and something shifted behind his carefully constructed walls. Those eyes, that shade of green, the shape of her face beneath the dirt and tears. A memory, sharp and painful, pierced through decades of careful forgetting. Another pair of green eyes. Another desperate plea. Another moment when he had chosen duty over humanity. The guards reached them. Your Grace, we apologize profusely for this disturbance. We'll remove her immediately. No. The word came out harder than he intended. Friedrich set down his glass on the edge of the fountain. Where is your mother, child, Leopoldstadt? The old brick building on Taberstrasse, 3rd floor. Please, sir, we have to hurry. Anna's fingers tightened on his trousers, her knuckles white. The crowd had formed a perfect circle around them now, watching with fascination and horror. Countess Elizabeth's voice cut through the murmurs. Friedrich, surely you're not considering this. It's highly inappropriate. The child is clearly lying for money. Friedrich's voice was quiet, but it carried an edge that made the Countess fall silent. He removed his white gloves carefully, one finger at a time, and tucked them into his breast pocket. Then he bent down and in one smooth motion lifted Anna into his arms. A collective gasp rippled through the assembly. The child's dirty dress pressed against his pristine frock coat, leaving smears of mud and tears. Her bare feet dangled against his gray waistcoat. "Your Grace, you cannot be serious." The Countess stepped forward, her fan snapping shut. "Your reputation, the scandal." And for what? Some street urchin's fantasy? Friedrich looked at her, and for the first time that evening, his expression showed something beyond cold indifference. What flickered in those blue-gray eyes might have been anger or pain, or perhaps the ghost of an old shame finally demanding to be confronted. "My carriage," he commanded to his stunned footman. "Now! Friedrich, if you leave now carrying that child, you'll be the talk of Vienna. No respectable household will." Elizabeth's carefully maintained composure was cracking. "Then they'll have something to talk about." He turned toward the garden exit. Anna clutched against his chest, her small arms wrapping around his neck with desperate hope. The crowd parted silently this time, their faces a mixture of shock, disgust, and barely concealed curiosity. The orchestra remained frozen, instruments held but silent. The charity ball, meant to celebrate the aristocracy's benevolence toward the poor, had been interrupted by actual poverty in its rawest form. As Friedrich's boots clicked against the stone pathway, Anna whispered against his shoulder, her voice muffled by his coat. "Thank you, sir. Thank you. Mama said no one would help. That fine people don't see us." Something in Friedrich's jaw tightened. "What's your name, child?" "Anna, sir." Anna Hoffman. The name meant nothing to him, yet everything about this moment felt like destiny's cruel joke. He reached his black lacquered carriage where his driver stood with mouth agape. "Leopoldstadt, Taberstrasse, and drive as if the devil himself is chasing us." The driver recovered quickly, nodding sharply. Friedrich climbed into the carriage, still holding Anna, who seemed afraid that if she let go, this miraculous rescue would vanish like a dream. As the carriage lurched forward, leaving the manicured gardens and shocked aristocrats behind, Vienna began its transformation. The Ringstrasse, with its magnificent neo-Renaissance buildings and gas lamps just beginning to glow in the gathering dusk, gave way to older streets. The broad boulevards narrowed. The elegant facades became simpler, then shabby, then decrepit. Friedrich had not visited Leopoldstadt in over 20 years. He had spent those 2 decades carefully avoiding this part of the city where the buildings crowded together like teeth in a diseased mouth, where the streets smelled of industrial waste and human desperation, where the darkness between the few working street lamps seemed to swallow hope itself. Anna shifted in his arms, her green eyes fixed on his face. "Are you really going to help Mama? You're not going to change your mind?" "I don't change my mind once it's made, child." But even as he said it, Friedrich wondered if that was true. He had changed his mind once long ago, and the consequences had haunted him ever since. The carriage rolled past a group of factory workers trudging home, their faces gray with exhaustion and soot. Past a woman selling wilted flowers on a corner, her baby wrapped in rags and crying weakly. Past children not much older than Anna, barefoot in the October chill, playing in the mud of the street with sticks and stones. This was the Vienna that the aristocracy pretended didn't exist. The city beneath the city where the golden light of the Ringstrasse never penetrated. Friedrich had been raised to see these people as statistics, as problems to be solved through charity balls and distant legislation, never as humans with faces and names and stories. But Anna had a face, and her mother had a name. And somewhere in a crumbling building ahead, a woman was dying because men like him had created a world where such deaths were commonplace and unremarkable. The carriage stopped abruptly. "Your Grace, this is as far as I can take the carriage. The streets are too narrow." The driver's voice carried clear reluctance. This was not a neighborhood where gilded carriages were safe. Friedrich stepped down, still carrying Anna. The street was worse than he'd imagined from inside the carriage. The cobblestones were broken and uneven, covered in a slick mixture of mud, sewage, and refuse. The buildings leaned inward, their brick facades dark with soot and age, windows cracked or stuffed with rags. Laundry hung between the structures like flags of surrender, and the air reeked of coal smoke, rotting food, and human waste. "That one." Anna pointed to a 4-story building that looked like it might collapse if someone sneezed too hard. "3rd floor, the door at the end." Friedrich set her down, and she immediately grabbed his hand, pulling him forward with surprising strength. They entered the building through a door that hung crooked on its hinges. The stairwell was pitch black and smelled of mold and urine. The wooden stairs creaked ominously under his weight, and he could hear rats scurrying in the walls. Anna flew up the stairs ahead of him, her bare feet silent on the rotting wood. By the time Friedrich reached the 3rd floor, breathing harder than he cared to admit, she was already at a door at the end of the narrow hallway, pounding on it with her small fists. "Mama! Mama! I brought help! Mama!" Friedrich reached the door and tried the handle. Locked. "Step back, Anna." He raised his foot and drove it into the wood beside the lock. The door splintered and flew open, revealing a room lit only by the dying light from a single cracked window. The smell hit him first, blood, sweat, and fear. Then he saw her. Margarethe Hoffmann lay on a narrow bed pushed against one wall, her body curled in on itself. Her face was a mass of bruises, one eye swollen completely shut, her lips split and bleeding. Her blonde hair, the same shade as Anna's, was matted with blood. Her blue work dress was torn and stained dark, and she clutched her ribs with one arm, each breath a visible agony. But it was her eyes, that one green eye that could still open, that stopped Friedrich in his tracks. Even through the swelling and blood he saw it. The shape, the color, the expression. Something familiar and impossible. "Mama!" Anna threw herself beside the bed, grabbing her mother's free hand. "Mama, I brought someone, a fine gentleman. He's going to help." Margarethe's eye focused slowly on Friedrich, standing in her broken doorway in his frock coat and silk vest, looking like a figure from another world that had accidentally stepped through a portal into hell. "No," the word came out as barely a whisper. "No, Anna, you shouldn't have. People like him don't help people like us." Friedrich moved forward mechanically, his mind reeling. He knelt beside the bed, his expensive trousers soaking up something wet from the floor he didn't want to identify. Up close, beneath the bruises and blood, he could see her face more clearly. 28 years old, perhaps, which would make her born around 1857. "I need to examine your injuries," he said, his voice rougher than intended. "The man who did this, where's he now?" "Gone." Margarethe coughed and blood flecked her lips. "Went to the tavern. He'll come back." "He always comes back." Anna clutched her mother's hand tighter. Herr Weber beats Mama when he drinks. Tonight was the worst. "I was hiding in the cupboard, but I heard everything. When he left, I ran to find help. I ran all the way to the big buildings with lights because Mama always said that's where the good people lived." "Hush, Anna." Margarethe's voice was pained. "Sir, thank you for your kindness in coming, but you should go. Klaus Herr Weber, he's dangerous. If he returns and finds you here, let me see your ribs." Friedrich gently tried to move her arm. She cried out, a sound of such agony that Anna burst into fresh tears. "Don't hurt her. Please don't hurt her." "I'm not going to hurt her, child. But if her ribs are broken, moving her could damage her lungs. We need to know before we transport her." Friedrich looked around the miserable room, seeing with new eyes the poverty he'd only ever known from statistics. One room serving as kitchen, bedroom, and living space. A cold stove with no fuel, a table with 2 chairs, one missing a leg, a cupboard where Anna had hidden, its door hanging open to reveal nearly empty shelves. This was where she lived. This was what his world had created while he danced at balls and worried about the correct order of forks. Carefully, moving with a gentleness that seemed incongruous with his stern appearance, Friedrich examined Margarethe's injuries. 2 ribs broken, possibly 3. Internal bleeding likely. The head wound concerning, but not immediately fatal. But the way she struggled to breathe, the blue tinge to her lips, that was the real danger. "You need a hospital. Now." "No money for hospitals." Margarethe closed her eye. "They won't take people like us. They'll take you." Friedrich stood, making a decision that would change everything, because I'm taking you. "Anna, get whatever you and your mother need. We're leaving." "Sir, you don't understand." Margarethe opened her eye again, and despite the bruises and blood, Friedrich saw strength there. "Klaus owns us. He has papers. He'll come looking. He'll hurt anyone who helps us. Then he'll have to hurt a duke." Friedrich removed his frock coat and laid it gently over her. "And I don't hurt easily." Anna was already moving, pulling a small cloth bag from under the bed. She stuffed in 2 dresses, a hairbrush with missing teeth, a small wooden doll with a painted face worn smooth by loving hands. Everything they owned fit in a bag smaller than the Countess's reticule. Friedrich bent, and as carefully as possible lifted Margarethe from the bed. She was alarmingly light, nothing but bones and bruises. She gasped in pain, but bit down on her lip to keep from crying out. "I've got you," he murmured. "Just breathe slowly. Small breaths." They made their way back down the treacherous stairs, Anna leading with a candle stub she'd grabbed, Friedrich following with Margarethe cradled against his chest. His arms, which lifted weights at his private gymnasium daily, barely registered her weight. But his heart, his carefully guarded, deliberately numbed heart, felt every shallow breath she took. The street had grown darker. Faces appeared in windows and doorways, watching but not interfering. In Leopoldstadt, you learned not to see things, not to get involved. Survival meant keeping your head down. The carriage waited, his driver's face pale with anxiety. The man's eyes widened when he saw the Duke carrying a bleeding woman, a dirty child trailing behind. Your Grace, if anyone sees, then they'll see a man keeping a promise. Open the door. Inside the carriage, Friedrich positioned Margarethe carefully across one seat, her head resting on his folded coat. Anna climbed in and immediately took her mother's hand again, her green eyes never leaving Margarethe's bruised face. To the General Hospital, Friedrich commanded, the main entrance. And send word ahead that Duke von Adler is bringing a patient who requires immediate attention. As the carriage rolled forward, leaving Leopoldstadt behind, Margarethe's eye fluttered open. She looked at Friedrich, sitting across from her in his shirt-sleeves and stained vest, no longer the immaculate aristocrat from the ball. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk everything for us?" Friedrich met her gaze, and in that moment he made a choice to speak a truth he'd buried for 23 years. Because once, a long time ago, someone begged me for help. And I turned away because helping them would have cost me my reputation, my position, my comfortable life. I chose my world over their world, and they died because of it. Margarethe's eye widened slightly. Who, my brother? The words tasted like ashes. My younger brother, Johann. He fell in love with a servant girl and got her pregnant. He begged me to help them, to use my influence to find them a place where they could live safely. But I was afraid of scandal. I was 25 and newly inherited to my title, and I believed that maintaining my standing was more important than his happiness. I told him to handle it himself, to pay the girl off and forget about it. Friedrich's hands clenched on his knees. He couldn't forget. He loved her. So he left everything behind, his name, his inheritance, his family to be with her. I never saw him again. 3 months later, I received word that he'd died in a factory accident in the outer districts, and his wife and unborn child died in childbirth shortly after. All because I was too proud, too afraid, too convinced that people like us and people like them lived in separate worlds that should never touch. The carriage fell silent except for the clatter of wheels on cobblestones. Anna stared at Friedrich with her enormous green eyes. Margarethe's breathing had grown slightly more labored. I have lived with that choice for 23 years, Friedrich continued, his voice rougher now. I have attended 1,000 charity balls and donated vast sums to help the poor in the abstract, all while maintaining the very system that creates such misery. I have been praised for my generosity while ensuring I never had to actually see the people I claimed to help. Never had to smell the streets they lived in. Never had to confront the reality that my comfort is built on their suffering. He looked directly at Margarethe. Tonight your daughter, brave, desperate, refused to give up. Anna gave me something I thought I'd lost forever. A chance to make a different choice. To be the man I should have been 23 years ago. Margarethe's eye filled with tears that spilled down her battered cheek. Your brother, what was his name? Johann? Johann von Adler. Friedrich's voice broke slightly on the name he hadn't spoken aloud in over 2 decades. And the girl? Did you ever learn her name? Elsa. Just Elsa. I never knew her family name. She was a kitchen maid, and I never bothered to learn anything more about her because she wasn't important enough to remember. The shame in his voice was palpable. The carriage turned onto broader streets. The buildings grew taller, more elegant. Gas lamps glowed golden. They were leaving poverty behind, climbing back up into the world of wealth and privilege. But something had changed. Friedrich looked down at his stained clothes, at his hands that still bore traces of blood and grime, at the woman and child who had crashed into his carefully ordered life like a meteorite through a greenhouse. Mama needs to rest, Anna said softly. Sir, your grace, what happens after the hospital? It was a question Friedrich had been avoiding. What happened after? He couldn't simply drop them at the hospital and return to his life. Klaus Weber would find them. The man owned their labor contract, a legal document that bound them to work for him until their debts were paid, debts that Weber undoubtedly manipulated to keep them perpetually enslaved. And even if Weber didn't find them, Margarethe had no money, no place to go, no way to survive once she healed. Anna would end up in an orphanage or worse. The cycle would continue. The carriage stopped before the grand entrance of the General Hospital, a massive neoclassical building that served both the wealthy in its private wings and the poor in its charity wards. Friedrich had donated to this hospital for years without ever setting foot inside it. Your Grace. His driver opened the door, his expression carefully neutral. Shall I send for a stretcher? No, I'll carry her. Friedrich gathered Margarithi back into his arms. She had lost consciousness, her breathing shallow and rapid. Not good. Anna jumped down and stayed close to his side as he strode through the hospital's main entrance. The grand foyer, with its marble floors and painted ceiling, fell silent as the Duke of Adler appeared carrying a bleeding peasant woman in his arms. A filthy, barefoot child at his heels, his evening clothes ruined with blood and mud. A doctor in a white coat hurried forward, followed by 2 nurses. "Your Grace, we received your message." "What? This woman has been beaten? Multiple broken ribs? Internal bleeding likely? Head trauma? She needs immediate attention." Friedrich's voice carried the unmistakable tone of command. "Of course, Your Grace. If you'll bring her to the charity ward, the private wing, the best room you have." The doctor hesitated, his eyes flickering between Friedrich's face and Margarithi's bruised one. "Your Grace, the private wing is for patients of a certain standing. This woman is under my personal protection. She will receive the finest care this hospital can provide, or I will know why. Do I make myself clear?" "Perfectly clear, Your Grace." The doctor gestured sharply to the nurses. "Prepare room 7. Alert Dr. Hartmann. Yes, wake him if necessary. Tell him Duke von Adler has brought a patient requiring his immediate expertise." They moved through the hospital in a strange procession, the Duke still carrying Margarithi, Anna clutching his vest, doctors and nurses scurrying ahead to prepare. The private wing was indeed private, with thick carpets, wallpapered halls, and rooms that looked more like hotel suites than hospital wards. Room 7 was spacious, with a large bed covered in crisp white linens, a sitting area with upholstered chairs, and windows that looked out over the hospital's gardens. Friedrich laid Margarithi on the bed with infinite care. Her face had gone gray, her breathing more labored. Blood seeped through the torn fabric of her dress. "Anna." Friedrich turned to the girl who stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes wide at the opulence around her. "Your mother is going to be cared for now. The doctors here are the best in Vienna. She's safe. But Herr Weber will not touch either of you again. I give you my word." A distinguished older doctor entered, his silver beard neatly trimmed, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Your Grace." He bowed slightly, then moved to the bed. "All business. What do we have?" As the doctor began his examination, Friedrich drew Anna away to the sitting area. A nurse brought warm water and clean towels, eyeing the filthy child with barely concealed distaste. "Let's get you cleaned up," Friedrich said. He'd never cleaned a child in his life, but he took a towel and began gently washing Anna's face. The grime came away to reveal pale skin dusted with freckles, making her green eyes even more striking. Is Mama going to die? Anna's voice was small, terrified. Friedrich paused, the towel still in his hand. He wanted to lie, to give her false comfort, but something about her direct gaze demanded honesty. "I don't know. She's badly hurt. But she has the best doctors in Vienna, and she has you, and she has me. That's more than she had an hour ago. Why are you really doing this?" Anna searched his face. "Is it just about your brother?" Friedrich sat back, surprised by her perceptiveness. "Partly. But also, have you ever done something so wrong that you couldn't forgive yourself? And then one day someone gives you a chance to do something right, and you take it because it might be your only chance?" Anna nodded slowly. "Once I stole bread from Herr Muller's bakery because Mama was sick and hadn't eaten in 2 days. I felt bad for a long time. But then I found Frau Muller's cat when it got lost, and I brought it back, and she hugged me and said I was a good girl. Is it like that?" "Exactly like that." Friedrich felt something twist in his chest. "Your mother is Frau Muller's cat, and you're giving me a chance to be a good man." The doctor approached, his expression grave. "Your Grace, may I speak with you?" Friedrich rose and followed him to the far corner of the room. Anna stayed near her mother, holding her hand, whispering prayers Friedrich hadn't heard since childhood. "The internal injuries are serious," Dr. Hartmann said quietly. 3 broken ribs, one of which punctured her lung. There's significant internal bleeding. I've seen this pattern of injuries before, systematic, sustained violence designed to cause maximum pain without immediate death. Can you save her? I can try. But I'll be honest with you. Your Grace, the next 24 hours will determine everything. If infection sets in, if the internal bleeding doesn't stop, if the lung collapses further, ... Double quotes, he spread his hands. She's young and was probably strong before malnutrition and repeated abuse weakened her. That's in her favor. But she's also received minimal care until now, and the injuries are severe. Friedrich nodded slowly. Do whatever is necessary. Cost is no object. I want round-the-clock care. The best medications. Whatever she needs. Of course, Your Grace. The doctor hesitated. If I may ask, is she related to you in some way? She's someone who deserves to live. Friedrich's voice was flat. That should be enough. Indeed, Your Grace. Through the night, Friedrich stayed. He sent his driver back to his townhouse for fresh clothes and specific instructions for his household staff. He moved Anna to a second bed that the nurses brought in, and watched as the child finally fell asleep, exhausted from terror and relief. He sat in one of the upholstered chairs and watched doctors and nurses move in and out, treating Margarethi's injuries, setting her ribs, draining fluid from around her lungs, stitching the worst cuts. Somewhere around midnight, a nurse brought him coffee and sandwiches. He didn't remember eating them. At 2:30 in the morning, Margarethi woke briefly. Her bandaged head turned on the white pillow, and her one visible eye found him sitting in the shadows. "Still here," she whispered. "Still here." Friedrich moved closer to the bed. "The doctors are optimistic, Anna. Sleeping. Safe." Margarethi's eye closed, then opened again. "Klaus will come. He has papers. Legal papers that say I owe him money. He'll use them to get me back. I have lawyers. Better ones." Friedrich's voice hardened. "And I have something he doesn't. Legitimate power. Let him come." "Why?" The question again, more urgent now. "You don't even know us. You don't owe us anything. People like you don't do this for people like me." Friedrich was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled his chair closer to the bed, close enough that he could speak softly without being overheard. "Can I tell you what I think happened to my brother Johann and his Elsa? I've spent 23 years imagining it." Margarethi didn't respond, but her eye remained fixed on his face. "I think they went to Leopoldstadt or somewhere like it," Friedrich began, his voice rough with emotion. "I think Johann found work in a factory or a warehouse, brutal labor that destroyed his body. I think Elsa, pregnant and scared, took whatever work she could find, probably laundry or sewing, until she couldn't hide her condition anymore. I think they lived in a room like yours or worse. I think they went hungry so they could save money for the baby." He paused, his hands clenched on the arms of the chair. "I think the night Elsa went into labor, they couldn't afford a doctor or a midwife. I think Johann held her hand while she screamed and bled, and watched her and their child die because he had no money and no power and no brother who cared enough to help." Friedrich's voice broke. I think in those final moments, as he held Elsa's body and the baby that never drew breath, he remembered that he had a brother with wealth and influence and connections. A brother who could have saved them with a word, a letter, a small portion of money that meant nothing to him but would have meant everything to them. Tears tracked down his face now. The first he'd shed since that terrible day 23 years ago when the letter arrived. I think he died in that factory accident 3 months later, not because he was careless, but because he no longer cared whether he lived or died. And I think his last thought was probably relief that he was finally joining Elsa and their baby. The room was silent except for the ticking of a wall clock and Margarethi's labored breathing. "So you ask why I'm doing this?" Friedrich wiped his face roughly. "Because you're not Elsa, but you could be. Anna is not my brother's child, but she could have been. And this time, this one time, I can make the choice I should have made before. I can be the brother Johann deserved. The man I should have been." Margarethi's eye filled with tears. "Your brother, would he forgive you, do you think?" "No." Friedrich's answer was immediate and brutal. "I don't deserve forgiveness. But maybe if I spend the rest of my life making sure that what happened to him doesn't happen to others, maybe that's something. Not redemption, but something. There are thousands of us." Margarethi's voice was barely audible. "Thousands of Elsas and Johanns in Leopoldstadt, and beyond. You can't save us all, no, but I can save you, and Anna, and maybe that will lead to saving others." Friedrich leaned forward. "Margarethi, I'm going to make you a promise. Not just that Klaus Weber will never touch you again, that's a given, but that you and Anna will never have to return to Leopoldstadt. That Anna will go to school. That you'll have work that doesn't break your body and spirit. That you'll have a home with locks on the doors and food in the cupboards and no fear. Fine promises from a duke who'll forget us when the morning comes. I never forget my promises. Ask anyone who knows me, I'm known for exactly 2 things, being cold and keeping my word. So trust in the second if you can't trust the first." Margarethi studied his face for a long moment. Then, with obvious effort, she lifted her unbandaged hand from the blanket. Friedrich took it gently, feeling how small and work-roughened it was, the calluses and scars of hard labor. "I'll trust you," she whispered, "because Anna already does, and Anna's smarter than me. Anna's extraordinary. I suspect she gets that from her mother." Margarethi's eye closed, exhaustion claiming her. "Don't make me regret trusting you, Your Grace. I won't. I swear on my brother's memory, I won't." By morning, word had spread through Vienna like wildfire. The Duke von Adler, that paragon of aristocratic propriety, had abandoned a charity ball to rescue a beaten woman from Leopoldstadt. He'd carried her through the hospital in his ruined evening clothes. He'd demanded she be placed in the private wing. He'd spent the entire night at her bedside. The scandal was delicious. The speculation was endless. Was she his mistress, his illegitimate daughter? Some dark secret from his past? At 9:30, Countess Elisabeth von Steinberg arrived at the hospital with 3 other aristocratic ladies in tow, ostensibly to check on Friedrich's welfare, but really to satisfy their ravenous curiosity. They found him in the sitting room of room 7, wearing fresh clothes his servants had brought, but looking haggard, unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes. Anna sat beside him, clean now and wearing a new dress one of the nurses had found, eating breakfast with the focused intensity of someone who'd been hungry too long. Friedrich. The Countess swept in, her perfume overwhelming in the antiseptic environment. "My dear Duke, we've been so worried. Whatever possessed you two?" She stopped abruptly when she saw Margarethe sleeping in the bed beyond, her face still swollen and discolored despite the bandages. "Good morning, Elizabeth." Friedrich's voice was cold enough to freeze water. "I trust you slept well?" "Well? How could I sleep after you vanished with that creature?" "Friedrich, people are talking." "Your reputation." "My reputation," Friedrich interrupted, standing slowly, "was built on the appearance of charity without its substance, on caring about the poor from a comfortable distance, on doing just enough to appear virtuous while ensuring I never had to actually see, smell, or touch the reality of poverty. If that reputation is destroyed, I can't say I'll miss it." The Countess's face flushed. "You're being absurd. One night of misguided heroics and you think you understand the world? Friedrich, this woman is nobody. Her name is Margarethe Hoffmann." Friedrich's voice cut like steel. "And this is her daughter, Anna. They are not nobody. They are people who have suffered while we danced and congratulated ourselves on our benevolence." Anna looked up at the Countess with those enormous green eyes, and Elizabeth took an involuntary step backward, as if the child might contaminate her. "You can't possibly intend to continue this association?" One of the other ladies spoke up, her voice shrill with shock. "What will people say?" "They'll say whatever they choose to say." Friedrich moved to stand beside Anna's chair, his hand coming to rest protectively on her shoulder. "I've spent my entire adult life worrying about what people say. I'm tired of it. But the scandal, let them talk." Friedrich's jaw set in a way his staff would have recognized, a sign that arguing was pointless. "Now, if you'll excuse us, Margarethe needs rest and Anna needs stability, not a parade of curious spectators treating their suffering as entertainment." The Countess drew herself up, her brown eyes flashing. "You're making a terrible mistake, Friedrich. When you come to your senses and realize what you've sacrificed for these people, don't expect society to welcome you back with open arms. Elizabeth," Friedrich's voice dropped to something dangerous, "I've attended your dinners and balls for years. I've smiled at your cutting remarks and tolerated your casual cruelty disguised as wit. I've watched you and your friends discuss the poor as if they were theoretical problems rather than human beings. And I've said nothing because I was no different." He took a step toward her, and she actually backed up. "But I'm different now, or at least I'm trying to be. So you can take your warnings and your scandal and your narrow little world and you can go. Because I have more important things to do than worry about your opinion." The ladies left in a flurry of rustling silk and offended sensibilities. Anna watched them go, then looked up at Friedrich. "You're going to lose all your friends because of us." "They weren't friends, Anna. They were people I attended parties with. There's a difference." He sat back down beside her. "Finish your breakfast." But Anna wasn't easily distracted. "What happens when we leave the hospital?" "We can't go back to Taberstrasse. Herr Weber won't be a problem. Friedrich had been working on this throughout the night. I've sent word to my lawyers. They're examining Weber's labor contract with your mother. I suspect we'll find it's legally questionable at best, fraudulent at worst. Men like Weber prey on the desperate, trapping them in impossible debt they can never repay. But even if the papers aren't good, where will we go?" Anna's voice was small. "We don't have any money. Mama doesn't have any family. It's just been us and him." Friedrich had thought about this too. He'd thought about little else, actually, during the long night hours. "I own a townhouse here in Vienna. It's far too large for one person. I also own estates in the countryside. All of them have servants' quarters that stand empty. You and your mother will stay in one of them until she's recovered and can decide what she wants to." You'd let us live in your house?" Anna's eyes went wide. "Yes, but we're nobody. We're just stop." Friedrich turned to face her fully. "Don't ever say that again. You're not nobody. You're Anna Hoffman, who was brave enough to crash an aristocratic ball and demand help for her mother. You're someone who ran through the streets of Vienna barefoot and afraid but didn't give up. You're extraordinary. Don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you otherwise." Anna's eyes filled with tears. She launched herself at Friedrich, wrapping her thin arms around his waist and burying her face in his vest. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you. Thank you." Friedrich sat frozen for a moment, unsure what to do with this display of affection. Then slowly he placed one hand on her head, stroking her clean blonde hair awkwardly. "You're welcome, child." Dr. Hartman entered, medical bag in hand. "Ah, Your Grace. Good morning. I have positive news. Frau Hoffman's condition has stabilized overnight. The internal bleeding has stopped, and while she's far from healed, I'm cautiously optimistic she'll recover." Relief washed over Friedrich so intensely it almost hurt. "When can she leave the hospital?" "Not for at least 2 weeks, perhaps 3. The ribs need time to heal, and we must ensure no infection develops. She'll need constant care even after she's released. No heavy work, limited movement, careful monitoring." The doctor paused. "I must ask, Your Grace, what are your plans for these patients?" "They'll be staying with me. I'll hire a nurse for Margarethi's continued care." The doctor's eyebrows rose, but he was too professional to comment. "Very well, I'll prepare instructions for her ongoing treatment." The days that followed were unlike any Friedrich had ever experienced. He found himself spending hours at the hospital, sitting with Anna while Margarethi slept, reading to the child from books he'd had delivered, teaching her simple arithmetic. She was frighteningly intelligent, soaking up knowledge like a sponge, asking questions that often left him scrambling for answers. Margarethi improved slowly. The swelling in her face went down, revealing features that were striking despite the lingering bruises. She watched Friedrich with a mixture of gratitude and wariness, as if expecting him to change his mind at any moment. On the 5th day, Klaus Weber arrived. Friedrich was reading to Anna a fairy tale about a princess and a frog when the commotion started in the hallway. Raised voices, a nurse protesting, heavy boots on the polished floor. The door burst open. Klaus Weber filled the doorframe, a massive man with greasy black hair, unshaven face, and small, cruel eyes. He reeked of cheap alcohol and old sweat. "There you are, you ungrateful bitch." He pointed at Margarethi, who had gone pale in the bed. "I've been looking everywhere. You think you can just leave? You owe me money. You're mine until that debt is paid." Anna screamed and pressed herself against Friedrich's side. Margarethi tried to sit up, gasping with pain and fear. Friedrich stood slowly, placing himself between Weber and the bed. "You need to leave. Now." Weber's eyes focused on Friedrich for the first time, taking in his expensive clothes and aristocratic bearing. For a moment, uncertainty flickered across his brutal face. Then he spat on the floor. "Who the hell are you, her fancy man? She's a whore and she's mine. I got papers. Those papers are fraudulent." Friedrich's voice was ice. "My lawyers have examined them. The debt you claim she owes is fabricated. The interest rates are illegal, and the labor terms violate imperial statutes. You have no legal claim to her or her child." "Legal claim?" Weber laughed, an ugly sound. "You think I care about legal? I know where she lives. I know where her brat goes. You can't protect them forever, fancy man. One night, one dark street, and..." He didn't finish the sentence because Friedrich moved faster than Weber expected. Years of fencing and riding had kept the Duke fit, and fury gave him speed. He grabbed Weber's collar and slammed him against the doorframe with enough force to rattle the man's teeth. "Listen carefully," Friedrich said, his voice low and deadly. "You're going to leave this hospital. You're going to leave Vienna. And you're never going to come near Margarethia or Anna again, because if you do, I will destroy you." Weber tried to laugh, but Friedrich's grip on his throat made it come out as a wheeze. "You think you scare me? You're just some rich..." "I'm Duke Friedrich von Adler." Friedrich spoke each word clearly. "I have the Emperor's ear. I sit on the Imperial Council. I can have you arrested on any charge I choose. I can ensure you never work again. I can make you disappear into a military prison on the Hungarian border where no one will hear your screams. Or, and this is my preference, I can ensure that every factory owner, landlord, and business owner in Vienna knows you're a fraud and a coward who beats women." He leaned closer, his blue-gray eyes boring into Weber's. "You prey on the weak because you are weak. You hurt women because you're afraid of men who might fight back. Well, I'm fighting back. And unlike Margarethia, I have power. So I'll ask you once more, you going to leave peacefully, or am I going to demonstrate exactly what that power can do?" Weber's face had gone from red to white. His small eyes darted around, looking for escape. "You can't. I can. And I will." Friedrich released him with a shove that sent the larger man stumbling backward. You have 1 hour to be on a train out of Vienna. If you're still here after that, I'll have you arrested for trespassing in a hospital. Assault, fraud, and anything else my lawyers can invent. And trust me, they're very creative. Weber backed away, his bravado crumbling. This isn't over. You can't watch them every minute. I'll come back. No, you won't. Friedrich stepped forward and Weber stumbled over his own feet. Because if you do, I'll make sure the next beating you deliver is your last. There are labor camps in Siberia that need workers. One word from me and you'll spend the rest of your miserable life breaking rocks in the snow. Is Margarethi's imaginary debt worth that? Weber fled. His heavy boots thundered down the hallway and they heard him cursing as he went. Friedrich stood in the doorway until the sounds faded, then turned back to the room. Margarethi was crying silently, tears streaming down her bruised face. Anna had her face buried in the bed covers, her small body shaking. Friedrich returned to his chair, his hands trembling slightly with residual adrenaline and anger. He's gone, Friedrich said quietly. And he won't be back. You don't know that. Margarethi's voice was thick with tears. Men like Klaus don't give up. He'll wait until you're not around, and then my men will be around. Friedrich had made this decision during the confrontation. I'm hiring private security. They'll watch the hospital and later my townhouse. Weber won't get within 100 yards of you. You can't do this forever, Margarethi whispered. Eventually you'll get tired of playing protector. You'll go back to your life, and we'll be alone again. Friedrich met her gaze steadily. I don't play at things, Frau Hoffmann. When I commit to something, I see it through. Weber threatened you and Anna in my presence. That makes this personal. Over the next week, Friedrich was true to his word. Security was hired 2 former military men who looked like they could break Klaus Weber in half. They took shifts outside Margarethi's hospital room, and Friedrich paid them well enough that their loyalty was assured. But more than security measures, something else was developing. Friedrich found himself talking to Margarethi during her waking hours, really talking in a way he hadn't talked to anyone in years. She told him about her life born to poor farmers, orphaned young, worked as a servant until she married a factory worker who died in an accident, leaving her pregnant and penniless. That's when Klaus found me, she said one afternoon, her voice bitter. I was desperate, and he offered work and a place to live. I didn't realize until too late that his offer was a trap. Every month, the debt grew instead of shrinking. The rent he charged was 3 times what anyone else paid. The food he provided was rotten and overpriced, but by then I'd signed his papers and I had Anna to think about. How long were you with him? 7 years. 7 years of that hell. Margarethi looked toward the window where autumn sunlight filtered through gauze curtains. I tried to leave twice. The first time he found us within hours and beat me so badly I couldn't walk for a week. The second time he threatened Anna. Said if I ran again he'd hurt her instead of me. So I stayed. Took his beatings. Kept Anna hidden when he drank. Survived. Friedrich felt anger kindle again in his chest. You're incredibly brave. I'm not brave. I'm just a mother. Margarethi turned back to him. You do what you must for your children. You'd understand if you had any. I don't. Never married. Friedrich hesitated, then decided honesty was owed. I was engaged once, 20 years ago, to a woman of appropriate standing and pedigree. We would have been miserable together, but it was what was expected. Then my brother Johann died, and I couldn't do it. Couldn't pretend everything was fine when I knew what I'd done. I broke the engagement. Haven't seriously considered marriage since. Because of guilt? Because I didn't deserve happiness when Johann never got his. Friedrich's voice was flat. It seemed wrong to build a life on the grave of his. Margarethi was quiet for a moment. Your brother? If he loved that girl as much as you say, do you think he'd want you to spend your whole life in misery? Or would he want you to honor him by being better? The question hit Friedrich like a physical blow. He'd never thought of it that way. His penance had always been suffering, denying himself joy as payment for his sin. But what if that wasn't what Johann would have wanted? What if true honor meant change, not punishment? I don't know, he admitted finally. I think, Margarethi said softly, that if your brother loved you even a little bit, he'd want you to forgive yourself. Because guilt can be a prison just as surely as Klaus's contracts trapped me. Friedrich looked at this woman, beaten, broken, but somehow not defeated, and felt something crack in his chest. The wall he'd built around his heart 23 years ago had a fissure, and through it light was beginning to seep. On the 16th day, Margarethi was discharged. The doctor gave strict instructions, no heavy work, limited movement, medications 3 times daily, gradual increase in activity. Friedrich listened carefully, taking notes in his precise handwriting. The carriage ride to his townhouse was quiet. Margarethi sat with Anna pressed against her side. both of them staring out the windows at the elegant buildings of the First District. This was a Vienna they'd never imagined entering, much less living in. Friedrich's townhouse was a 3-story neo-Baroque building with a cream-colored facade, tall windows, and an ornate iron gate. Inside, it was elegantly furnished but somehow cold, as if the beautiful objects had never been truly lived with. His household staff, cook, butler, 2 maids, and a footman stood in the entrance hall, their faces carefully neutral as their employer arrived with 2 bedraggled refugees from Leopoldstadt. "This is Frau Margarethe Hoffmann and her daughter Anna," Friedrich announced. "They'll be staying with us for the foreseeable future. Margarethe is recovering from serious injuries and requires careful accommodation. Anna will need a tutor arranged. She's remarkably bright and has missed too much education already." He turned to his butler, Herr Fischer, a dignified man in his 60s. "Please prepare the green suite for Frau Hoffmann and the adjoining room for Anna. Ensure they have everything they need. Also arrange for a nurse to attend Frau Margarethe daily. Of course, Your Grace." Fischer's expression didn't waver. "Will they be dining with you?" Friedrich caught the subtle emphasis on you, the unspoken question of whether these guests would be treated as servants or equals. "They will. We'll all dine together." A ripple of surprise moved through the staff, but no one dared comment. Friedrich had a reputation as a fair but exacting employer, and none of them wanted to test his current mood. The green suite was on the 2nd floor, a beautiful set of rooms with tall windows overlooking a private garden. Margarethe stood in the doorway, seemingly unable to enter, her face pale with disbelief. "This is for us?" Her voice was barely audible. "Too much?" Friedrich asked, genuinely uncertain. He had no frame of reference for what might overwhelm someone who'd lived in one room with broken furniture. "Too much? It's like a palace." Margarethe moved slowly into the room, trailing her fingers over the brocade curtains, the polished wood furniture, the thick carpet. "I've cleaned rooms like this, scrubbed floors like these. Never imagined I'd sleep in one." Anna had no such hesitation. She ran to the window, pressing her face to the glass. "Mama, there's a garden, a real garden with flowers and a fountain. Can we go there?" "Tomorrow," Friedrich said. "Today your mother needs to rest," the doctor said. "I know what the doctor said." Margarethe turned to face him, and in the afternoon light, with the bruises finally fading, he could see how beautiful she must have been before suffering marked her. "Why are you doing this? And please don't tell me again about your brother. There's more to it than that." Friedrich considered his answer carefully. "You're right. Johann is part of it, maybe the largest part. But also, I've spent 23 years being a particular kind of man. Cold, distant, dutiful. I've done everything expected of me and nothing that wasn't. I've been perfectly proper and perfectly empty." He moved to the window, looking out at the garden he never visited. Quote, "Then Anna burst into my world demanding I be human, demanding I care. And I realized I'd been sleepwalking through life, going through motions without meaning. You and Anna woke me up. And yes, it's uncomfortable and difficult, and I'm not sure what I'm doing half the time, but at least I'm awake." Margarethe joined him at the window. "We're your redemption project." "No." Friedrich turned to face her directly. "You're people I care about. That's different." Something shifted in Margarethe's expression, surprise giving way to cautious hope. "Psst, you barely know us." "I know Anna is the bravest child I've ever met. I know you survived 7 years of hell to protect her. I know you trusted me when you had no reason to. That's enough." They stood there in the fading light, 2 people from impossibly different worlds, connected by a desperate child's plea and a duke's need for redemption. Outside, Vienna continued its evening rituals, carriages rolling home, lamps being lit, the city dividing once again into its separate spheres of wealth and poverty, power and powerlessness. But inside this townhouse, something new was being built, something that didn't fit the neat categories of Viennese society, a family that wasn't a family, a household that crossed every social boundary, a future that no one could predict. Friedrich. Margarethe used his name for the first time, dropping the formal title. "Thank you. For everything. For believing Anna, for not turning away, for being brave enough to be different." "I should thank you," Friedrich replied, "for showing me there was a different way to be." Anna called from the adjoining room, where she discovered a bed that felt like sleeping on clouds. "Mama, Your Grace, come see. There's a doll on the bed. A real china doll with a blue dress." They moved to the doorway together and watched Anna dance around the room with her new treasure, her face radiant with joy. In that moment, Friedrich felt something he hadn't felt in 23 years, the weight of his guilt lifting slightly, making room for something lighter. Not quite happiness, not yet, but the possibility of it. And in that elegant townhouse in the first district of Vienna, surrounded by reminders of wealth and privilege, Duke Friedrich von Adler began to understand that redemption wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices. It was about showing up day after day, choosing compassion over convenience, staying when everything in his world told him to leave. It was about two people from different worlds learning to trust each other, about a little girl who crashed a ball and changed a duke's life, about finding humanity in the most unlikely places. And over the following months, Friedrich's world continued to shift. His former social circle shunned him almost entirely. Invitations to balls and dinners dried up. The Countess Elizabeth spread rumors that grew increasingly outlandish with each retelling. Other aristocrats crossed the street to avoid him. His name was whispered in drawing rooms with a mixture of pity and scandal. Friedrich found he didn't care. Instead, he found himself teaching Anna mathematics at the breakfast table, discussing philosophy with Margarete in the library, laughing at Anna's observations about the absurdity of aristocratic manners, taking both of them to the Prater Park on Sunday afternoons, ignoring the stares and whispers. Margarete healed slowly, both physically and emotionally. The bruises faded, her ribs knitted, the fear in her eyes diminished, and she began to smile more, and when she did, Friedrich found himself smiling back. Anna flourished like a flower finally given water and sun. She devoured books, asked endless questions, made friends with the household staff, who quickly adored her. She brought life and laughter into the quiet townhouse, and Friedrich realized he'd been living in a mausoleum of his own making. 6 months after that fateful night, Friedrich sat in his study when Margarete knocked and entered. She wore a simple blue dress that his household funds had purchased, her blonde hair neatly pinned. She looked healthy now, strong, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with fashion or cosmetics. "I've been thinking," she said, sitting in the chair across from his desk, "about what happens next." Friedrich set down his pen. "Next? I'm healed now. The doctor says I'm fully recovered. I can work again. Anna is settled with her tutor." Margarete folded her hands in her lap. "We can't stay here forever living on your charity." "It's not charity, Friedrich," she smiled gently. "It is, and it's been wonderful, and we'll never forget it. But we need to find our own way. I need to support Anna myself. Give her a life that's ours, not borrowed." Friedrich felt something clench in his chest. The thought of them leaving, of this house returning to its former quiet emptiness, was physically painful. "You don't have to go. There's no rush." "There is, though." Margarete leaned forward. "Because the longer we stay, the harder it will be to leave. For all of us." She was right, and Friedrich knew it, but knowing it didn't make it easier. "What will you do?" "I thought I could open a boarding house. Small, respectable. I'm good at managing households. I did it for Klaus, though he never appreciated it. With a small loan to start, which I would repay, I could make it work. Give Anna stability. Give us both purpose. A boarding house." Friedrich turned the idea over in his mind. "Where?" "Not Leopoldstadt. Somewhere better, but not too expensive. Maybe near the university district. Lots of students need rooms." It was a good plan. Practical, achievable, dignified. Everything Margarete needed. Friedrich should have been pleased. Instead, he felt an overwhelming sense of loss. Or he heard himself say, "You could stay here. Friedrich, hear me out." He stood, pacing to the window. "This house is too large for one person. It always has been. What if you stayed and ran the household? Properly. Not as my charity case, but as my housekeeper. You'd have a salary, responsibilities, independence. Anna would continue her education. You'd have security, but also purpose." Margarete was quiet for a long moment. "The gossip would be terrible. The gossip is already terrible. At least this way we'd be happy, would we?" She stood and joined him at the window. "Friedrich, you have to understand I can't just be your housekeeper. After everything that's happened, after how you've saved us and cared for us and changed your entire life for us, we can't go backward into formal roles. It would be a lie." "Then what do you suggest?" Friedrich turned to face her and found himself closer than he'd realized. Close enough to see the green flecks in her eyes, the faint freckles across her nose, the way her breath caught slightly. "I suggest," Margarete said softly, "that we be honest about what this is." "And what is this?" "I don't know exactly. A found family, a home built on second chances?" She reached up and gently touched his face, her work-roughened fingers against his cheek. "Something real, whatever we call it." Friedrich caught her hand, holding it against his face. "I'm not good at this. At feelings, relationships, any of it. I've spent decades building walls, then we'll tear them down together. Slowly. Carefully." Margarete smiled. "You saved us, Friedrich. Let us save you back." In the garden below, Anna played with the cook's daughter. their laughter floating up through the open window. The sound was so full of joy, so purely alive, that it made Friedrich's chest ache. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. "Happiness, family, a second chance. Johann never got his." "No, you probably don't," Margarethe agreed, and he huffed a surprised laugh. "But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is choosing to be better, choosing to live fully instead of half a live with guilt. Honoring Johann by being the man he believed you could be." Friedrich pulled her into his arms, and she came willingly, resting her head against his chest. They stood there in the study, two broken people healing each other, while outside the city of Vienna continued its eternal dance of wealth and poverty, privilege and suffering, walls and bridges. But inside this townhouse the walls were coming down, and a duke who had spent 23 years in darkness finally stepped into the light.